My research is about demographic shifts and students' academic performance. In the past decade, the United States has witnessed a significant transformation in its demographic landscape. This is according to the United States Department of Commerce Census Bureau 2020. The present diversity ratio shows a multi-ethnic population with no majority ethnic group. This is from the study of Johnson, McGee, and Mejia in 2023. This has profound implications for various aspects of our society, including education. This research seeks to explore the major ethnic demographic shifts that have taken place in the three largest school districts serving K through 8 in terms of student enrollment in Kern County over the last 10 years, and their potential impact on the Academic Performance Index, or the API, a widely used indicator of educational performance in California. This study will add to the body of research on the changing demographic landscape in California and develop a predictive model that can explain, or hopefully develop a predictive model that can explain the impact of these shifts to the overall academic achievement in English language arts and mathematics of students in the county of study. Understanding the dynamics of these demographic shifts and their relationship with API scores is crucial for policymakers, educators, and researchers as well, as it can inform targeted interventions and policy changes to address disparities in educational outcomes. In my research, I have three specific research questions to investigate. These are: number one, is there a correlation between the major demographic shifts and the academic performance indices in the last decade? Number two, how do these major shifts impact the overall academic performance of all students? And number three, do these shifts have any predictive influence on the academic performance indices outcome of certain subgroups of students and of all students? The Academic Performance Index, also known as the API, measures the English language arts and mathematics proficiency levels of students in California. According to a very recent study authored by Yugo and Pranti this year, California ranks near the bottom of the list among the 50 states and Washington, D.C., placing 33rd in language arts and 38th in mathematics. Two studies. A dissertation titled "The Predictive Influence of Family and Community Demographic Variables on Grade 7 Students' Achievement in Language Arts and Mathematics," and a publication from the International Journal of Science and Mathematics Education titled "The Relationship Between English Reading Proficiency and Academic Achievement of First-Year Science and Mathematics Students in a Multilingual Context," both explain the relationship of specific independent variables on students' academic performance. In Adam Wolf's dissertation, "The Predictive Influence of Family and Community Demographic Variables," the author's extensive research finds that the Living Wage Index did accurately predict the percentage of students who scored proficient or higher on the 2013 MCAS Language Arts and Mathematics test. In the other research, the relationship between English reading proficiency and academic achievement, the authors found that there is a correlation between the academic performance of students and their English language proficiency as L2 learners. They have evidence to show that ELP of L2 learners are a sound predictors of academic performance in math. Their studies demonstrated significant medium-sized effects of English reading proficiency on students' grade point average, or the GPA, by the end of year one, and a small but significant indirect relationship between reading proficiency and the final GPA scores by the end of year 4. In this particular study, the authors concluded that the contrasting outcomes of the three intersecting variables, I'm referring to internalizing behavior, locus of control, and self-concept, three intersecting variables have detrimental effect on the patterns of academic outcome that predict success in adult life. According to the authors of Dynamic Assessments of Identifying Spanish-Speaking EL's Risk for Math Disabilities, dynamic assessments conducted in Spanish diminished the impact of English language dominance and showed higher predictive validity in assessments conducted in Spanish than in English. This result, however, was true for assessing math calculating only, rather than math problem solving. The authors also concluded that EL's performance consistently regardless of their first language dominance. Again, let me repeat that. The authors also concluded that ELs perform consistently regardless of their first language dominance. Here, in this technical brief, conducted out of the need to improve the students' academic performance in schools not making adequate yearly progress for at least 2 consecutive years, the authors find that their findings are consistent with another research in that the subgroup proficiency rates exhibited a consistent order. That is, students in non-Title I schools had higher proficiency rates than did students in Title I schools not in improvement, and still higher than did students in Title I schools in improvement. In this research, the author's path analysis showed that injunctive norms, such as perception of the acceptability of academic effort, but not descriptive norms, such as perception of peers' typical academic efforts, significantly accounted for racial and ethnic group differences in self-reported engagement and standardized test scores, indicating that perceived norms may indeed contribute to racial ethnic differences in educational outcomes. In this particular study, cultural perspectives was found to play an important part in academic achievement of students. According to this research, 3 main findings emerged from the study. First, the growing Asian American advantage in academic achievement relative to whites is due more to a growing Asian gap in academic effort. Let me repeat that. The growing Asian American advantage in academic achievement relative to whites is due more to a growing Asian white gap in academic effort than to a gap in cognitive ability. Second, there is support for 2 explanations for the Asian white gap in academic effort. These are cultural orientation and immigration status. Third, Asian American youth pay very high psychological and social price for their academic success. Consistent with another research by Stoffelsma and Sporine in 2019, this study suggests that the role of first and language differences mattered more in the English language performance than in the math performance score. Investigating which domain-specific and domain-general skills measured predict mathematical learning difficulties, this research showed different but significant variations as regards which factors contribute to the students' identified math learning disabilities. Interestingly, in this study, the authors found that math learning difficulties can be predicted using non-demographic variables. For this study, using a unique qualitative approach to measure four identified influencing factors that determine the academic motivation, this research found that learners were influenced by a positive role model, a very powerful information ignored in the sadly declining values in the American um, education or American public education system. The factors investigated were, or the other factors investigated were home environment, peer influence, and teaching approaches, all of which were the focus of every legislative discussion the past 20 years in the United States. This research is a systematic literature review utilizing only publicly available quantitative data from database sources such as the California Department of Education and the U.S. Department of Commerce Bureau of Census. As this research will attempt to investigate the relationship between demographic shifts and the student's academic performance, statistical information on demographic landscapes will be pursued in order to uncover the three major shifts, and this might include emerging demographic shifts, if any. Demographic shifts, or demographic complexions and its transformation during the last decade will be investigated. Statistical information on respective demographic subgroups and their corresponding academic performance will be collected, tabulated, mapped, and graphically integrated to capture the three major shifts. Data will cover from the present or most recent available data and extend as far back as data is available, minimum of 5 years. This will be synthesized, interpreted, and analyzed for correlation versus the academic performance of each group and of all students in general. Matrices that organize and summarize the data in a sensible way to reveal the characteristics of the student, its movements, the direction of the movements will be created and prepared for visual interpretation. Charts like line, bar, or column, and scatter plots will be added to compare variables and their movements against other variables. The variables will be compared and tested for correlation using correlation coefficient. And depending upon the type of correlation that will be found, I will use appropriate measurement tools to determine the strength and direction of the correlation. Since I will be working on multiple demographic groups, at least 3, representing the major shifts I intend to find, I'll be using the analysis of variance, or the ANOVA, to determine if there were significant differences in the academic performance of these groups of students. Also, as I am working with historical data sets, other tools may be used, like the standard deviation, depending upon the need based on the data that will be collected. I'm referring to the similar data from other districts for triangulation and generalizability test. Note that this paper is a literature review research. All information will be collected solely from publicly available data on selected participants' academic indices scores. Participants' data are total representations of certain demographic groups and their corresponding overall scores. There will be no individual data or individual information or interaction or intervention with the selected participants. The data will be verified and triangulated with other database sources. Data and information will be tabulated and mapped for visual and descriptive synthesis and analysis. The point of interest is to find an explanation behind the persistently low academic performance of students in California by investigating independent variables like the demographic landscape changes, shifts, transformations that have occurred over a decade, and how this and other variables movements might have impacted the overall academic performance of students. This research has its limitations. This research is focused on only the 3 largest districts with enrollment of K through 8 in Kern County in terms of student population, showing the major demographic shifts. While this study will attempt to provide generalizability by extracting similar data from selected other districts, that effort is only to ensure replicability of this research. This research is not and should not be construed as representative of the entire student population of Kern County or of the state of California. Let me repeat that. This research is not and should not be construed as representative of the entire student population of Kern County or of the state of California. Finally, as there are confounding variables or factors not included in this study, the findings or results of the correlation may thus not be used or perceived as causations. This ends my presentation. The following references are studies that I found that I've used. I will use for this research. Many of them have similar approach. Many of them have similar variables, but we have different perspectives. So with that being said, my presentation ends here. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoy the presentation. Thank you.